Okay, good morning. I hope that this is not a crackly video. I hope you can hear what I'd like to share with you about this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is Lecha. So as you may well know, if you've been following along, we've had two Torah readings already in the book of Genesis. The book, obviously the beginning of Genesis is Genesis, and the second book is Noah, the story of Noah, which we talked about last week. So now, the end of that, we've created, God has created the world, God has created mankind. Please let me know if it's crackly. And we are now, after Noah, we are 10 generations after Noah. Noah actually is still alive at this time, I believe. Abraham, the rise of Abraham, who Abraham is. The rest of the book of Genesis is all about Abraham and his descendants. And so this is the beginning of the story of learning about Abraham and what he brings to the world and what we now, today, what we benefit from for what Abraham put into the world. So just to recap that concept, the concept that, could somebody tell me if it's crackly? Because if it is, I want to not continue. Bernice, maybe you could let me know. Perfect, great. So the idea of something happening in the beginning and how the beginning lays down the foundation for what will come. We speak before maybe of the analogy of DNA, putting down the genetic code into us, into anything, any living animal has DNA that gets put down. In the beginning is the most crucial time for that to be the best it can be, because from that comes the rest of the animal person. I was very blessed to be in the delivery room when my daughter delivered a baby on Friday, and I'm holding this little baby and seeing the beginning. This is the beginning of this baby's life, and what we do now has great impact on how this baby will develop. You know, will the baby feel loved? How much goes into the beginning of our existence, of our beginning in this world, what we do with children, what we do with babies, how crucial that is for their future development, not to pressure anybody, but just to understand the concept of how something in the beginning lays down something for what will come. So holding this baby last night and realizing, like the more love the baby feels or feels safe, that carries with that child into the world, how it will develop, how it will grow, how it will see himself as he gets older. And to really feel that is amazing. And I'm thinking about Abraham and how Abraham was our forefather. He was the father of who we all are. And what he laid down, what he started to put into the world, we're all benefiting from. We're understanding that when we pray every day and we say, Magen Avraham, we say that God shielded Abraham, but he's shielding us. We are an extension of Abraham. We are descendants of Abraham. So when we read in the morning prayers, in the Shemona Esrei, in the silent prayer, we say how God is our shield. The shield of Abraham is also our shield. He's also here protecting us and taking care of us, just like that he protected Abraham. What did Abraham do? How did Abraham actualize the potential that he had? What is it that he put into the world? And that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to talk about Abraham from now on, from the Lech until the end of the book of Genesis. We're really talking about Abraham and his immediate family. So in the beginning, when God created the world, God set man apart from the beginning, from the very beginning of creation. The creation of man, of Adam, of Adam and Eve was from the very beginning, and he created man in a different way from the other animals, such that man, quote unquote, is worthy to stand before God, which is an incredible thing to think that we who are a mixture of the heavens and the earth, and that we are the earth and the holy neshama that's blown into us, that we are quote unquote worthy to stand before God, whatever that means. And what does that mean? That means that we're going to look into the Torah and we're going to understand how people like Abraham were able to stand with God, to walk with God, to walk in front of God. We spoke about you last week about how Noah literally was sort of holding God. God was holding his hand, helping him along. And Abraham is the next step of that kind of relationship. So in the beginning, when you have a little child, they want to stand next to you. They're a little fearful of the world and they hold your hand. But as they get more secure, as they get a little bit older, they run ahead. And Abraham is that kind of progenitor who was running ahead. He was ahead of God. He was like trying to figure it out, trying to work it out, yearning to have a relationship with the creator of the universe. Not just creator of the universe, but the force that continues to exist in the world, that continues to have a relationship with mankind, continues to have a relationship with God, with the world. So Abraham was the one to actualize that in the beginning, to say, I am compelled to have a relationship with God, who is the creator of the universe. And so what's really interesting is that there's different languages that's used in the Torah to create. When God created the world, God created the world using a word called amira. It was God said, amar. It was the usage of the word amira. When God created the world, he used one particular language, one particular word to create the world. It was a perfect language. It was pure. It was God created the world. God said, let there be light. It was a language of God creating the world through words, using the term amira. Later on, so there were 10 utterances with which God created the world. We talked about that, I think, maybe some other time. Come back to that. But after that, then God uses the language of dibur, of speaking. It's a harsher language. And God commanded, the 10 commandments is a more of a compelling, right? In order to have this existence in the world, in order to stand before God could create a creation that is able, that is worthy to stand before God, right? There's a language of dibur, of God commanding, of compelling. And Abraham is the first one to be compelled, to feel that compulsion, to understand that as much as we human beings are separate from God, we have a perception of being separate from God, we understand ourselves existentially to be separate beings from God, we are also desirous of a connection to God, a spiritual yearning, a yearning to connect to God. So in the language of the Torah, it says that Abraham, okay, let's go back to the very beginning. The very beginning of this Torah portion is Lech is the name of the Torah portion, meaning go for yourself. God said to Abraham, go for yourself from your land, from your birthplace, from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. That is what God is asking Abraham to do. Go from your land for yourself. Like, this is going to benefit you. This is important for you to do. Separate yourself from your land where you were living with your family, from your birthplace, from your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. And I will make you a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Fourth sentence in this week's Torah portion. So Abraham went as God had spoken to him. And it's the language, the word is diber. It's a different language. All of a sudden it changes from the Amar language to the diber language. And this is Abraham. The point I want to bring out is Abraham is feeling a compulsion. He's feeling that God is telling him to do something, and he listens. He understands this is what he has to do, and he does it. He doesn't falter. He doesn't say hineni. We have other instances in the Torah where God speaks to people and they go, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm gonna do what you tell me to do. Abraham doesn't do that. God says, do this, and he just gets up and he does it. There's no conversation. He just does what God tells him to do. He tells him to leave his land, his birthplace, and his parents' home. And he's moving into a new place, a new paradigm. He doesn't know where he's going. God does not tell him where he's going. And again, bring it down into our lives. When we understand, maybe we have to change our circumstances. We have to move into a different place because the place we're in isn't good for us. We need to be in a different place. And we might not hear the calling of God saying you have to go, but sometimes we do, and sometimes we recognize that we're not in a place where we're thriving. We're not in a place where we're growing, where we're actualizing who we're supposed to be and what we can be in this world, and we're not doing that. So perhaps sometimes we do have to change our location. We have to move away from the forces, from the places that hold us back, from the places that bring us down, from the places that are not affirming who we are and giving us the potential to grow. I have a very intimate knowledge of a particular relationship where it cannot be a good relationship such that the person isn't feeling that, or both parties are not feeling that they're helping each other. They're pulling each other down. And in those circumstances, you have to be like an Abraham. You have to separate yourself. So that's that I want to bring out, that Abraham is different from anybody else at this point, that he is compelled to do what God tells him without a conversation, without a struggle, without an argument. Fine, you tell me to go, I'm going to get up and go. However hard it is for me to do, I trust that you, God, creator of the universe, you, God, who takes care of the world, you, God, who are intimately involved in my life, know what's best for me more than I know what's best for me, and I'm going to follow that calling. A calling. Do we have a calling? Do we have a sense of where we're supposed to be? I can tell you that right now in Israel, there's a trip going on that I was involved in, that I was part of helping to organize. And because my daughter was due to have her baby, actually I think her due date was yesterday, I chose to come here, to come to Atlanta and to take care of her and to help her and to not go on the trip. And where's my calling? I really want to be in Israel. I want to be on that trip. I really want to help my daughter. I want to be able to do both things. And at some point you have to choose. What's my choice? Where am I supposed to be? And I made the choice, obviously, to be here in Atlanta. And in the end, given the difficult delivery that she had and the postpartum difficulties that occurred, I am. There's no question in my mind that this is the place I'm supposed to be. This is the role I'm supposed to play, is to be the best mother I can be and to take care of this family as best as I can. And that's where I'm supposed to be. I'm not supposed to be over there in Israel. And you think, well, isn't it all about being in Israel? Yes, it is all about being in Israel. It's all also about our families. It's very much about our families. And we have no choice which families we're born into, but we do have a choice of how we interact with those families and what we give to those families and what we do for those families. So I feel like, are we all growing? Are we all of us, are we growing as we go through life? Yes, there's struggles, and sometimes there's bigger struggles, but they're all helping us actualize. And Abraham was the beginning of that lesson that we learn, where God gives him 10 major tests. And there's a conversation in the commentaries as to what the tests actually are. But he was given 10 different circumstances, struggles that he had to fight against, that he had to work through, that he had to grapple with, that he had to pull out from himself his potential, that to be able to actualize his potential through the journey of life, through the things that came his way, that he had to struggle with, that he had to work through, created him such that he could overflow his kindness, his goodness onto all those that he was in conversation with, that he was able to influence and able to connect. And it says that Abraham was the father. He was our forefather, right? He didn't birth us all, and all the people that followed him at the beginning of the Torah were not his biological descendants, but they were people that I imagine called him their father because of the role that he played in their lives, because he was their teacher, he was their role model, he was somebody who led by example. And his leading by example is something that I think the Jewish people and the Torah is something that wants to communicate, that as much as we can speak out all of these values, and we can read in the Torah and say it's good to give tzedakah, to be kind, it's good to all these things, unless we see it happening, unless we see people doing it, it's not actualized. It's all in potential. Abraham was the first one to actualize the potential of who he was. We talked about Noah. I think it's really interesting how we talked about Noah in the ark, and how when he got into the ark and he got into his little teva, his little construct that he had made. It took him 120 years to make this ark with all the animals, and he got into the ark, and now he's got to take care of all these animals. And what's being pulled out of Noah is the character trait of kindness. He's got to give to these animals, feed them and take care of them and feed them at the right time, and be up all day and all night taking care of all of these animals, and to actualize the kindness that exists within us in potential, to actually actualize that through action. And that's what we're going to learn with Abraham, that he recognized that he was a creation of God, set apart from the other creations, that is worthy to stand before God, and to maybe go ahead of God, to be in front of God, to sort of take God's lesson and push them out into the world, to speak to the people in his environment, to open himself up to being able to influence the people around him, and to speak about the creator of the universe, to speak about God, to speak about monotheism, to speak about what it is that God wants from us, and that the ability, before we receive the Torah, the ability to understand what God wanted through looking at the world, through looking at nature. And again, these are concepts that are really hard to understand, but the mystical teaching is that the whole world was created by God looking into the Torah. The Torah is like a blueprint. An architect, before he creates a house, draws a blueprint and uses the blueprint to then create the house, right? So again, I don't really know how this works, but that's the analogy given as to how God created the universe through looking into the Torah. So in the Torah, the Torah is the blueprint for creating the universe. So therefore, it makes sense that you could look at the house and say, okay, that's the blueprint, matches the house. So I could look at the house and create the blueprint. That's what Abraham was able to do. He was able to look at the world, the beautiful world that he existed in, and he could look into nature, and he could look around him, and he could work backwards to ascertain what the blueprint was, to ascertain what it is, how it was that God created the world. What did God create the world from? From a blueprint, that's the Torah. So it sort of went the other way around. Abraham was able to do that. Later on, obviously, we got the Torah, and we look into the Torah to understand how to live our lives. But Abraham apparently was able to understand the Torah by looking into the world, right? And here's a really amazing concept that I think is really something worth pontificating upon, is the idea that we, again, I mentioned how we obviously feel ourselves to be separate. We're separate. We understand ourselves. We feel ourselves to be separate from God. Whether or not we are, we can talk about Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing other than God, and God is the oneness of the universe, and we're all part of that oneness. We're like the baby in utero, God, the divine mother. We're inside of the uterus of the divine mother. That's one whole concept. Another whole concept is our chokhmah. What's our knowledge? How do we see the world? And we see ourselves as separate from God. We see ourselves as separate people who can make choices, who can do things. We have a certain control over our environment, and nowadays we have a lot of control until we don't have any control. And I'm sorry to belabor the point, excuse the pun. When my daughter was in labor, and she delivered the baby, and then she had a lot of hemorrhaging postpartum, and the hemorrhaging was intense, and there were a lot of doctors in the room, and there were lots of blood transfusions going on, and there was difficulty ascertaining where the bleeding was coming from. Thank God it's all behind us, and we know, and we were able to stop the bleeding, and she's fine, and she's home, and everything's good. But in that moment of not knowing where the blood was coming from, not knowing what was going to happen, oh my gosh, I could tell you I was really scared. I was very scared for her life. And as much as we have the technology, we have the control, and we can put blood transfusions up, there are things that are outside our control. And to think that we are, to understand that like really deeply, and to understand that then maybe that's where the faith comes from. Maybe that's where like I have to trust that this is going to be good. Whichever way it's going to go, it's going to be good, whether it's the way I want it to go or not. And I think Abraham is setting down that DNA of saying, I'm going to get up, Lecha, I'm going to get up from my place of quote-unquote comfort, from the place I know, from my father's house, my land, my birthplace, everything I know, and I'm going to move because God needs me to move. God wants me to move. In order to actualize my potential, I have to move. I have to move into a different place, a different location, a different, and I don't know where I'm going. You're leading me, and I'm following you, and I don't know where I'm going. And a little bit of that I felt in that delivery room. I don't know where this is going, and I'm very fearful. And maybe actually shouldn't have been fearful, but I was, because I was scared, and I love my daughter, and I didn't want anything terrible to happen to her. But maybe a higher level of faith or trust or something is saying like it's all in your hands, and whatever happens, it happens. But I can tell you, I prayed very hard in that delivery room that my daughter should be should get through this, and she did, thank God. But again, not knowing the idea, the concept, the fact is that we don't know. We can't look into the future. And actually, as Jews, we're told, don't go to the fortune tellers. Don't go look into the crystal balls. Don't try to predict what will be in the future. Don't do that. That's not your job. Your job is to live now, to live in this moment, to do what you need to do now. And you don't know what the outcome is. What's the saying from the Ethics of the Fathers? Yours is not to necessarily complete the job. Yours is the role is to start, to work, to put your effort in. And you don't know what the outcome will be. We don't know what the outcome will be. We think we do, but we don't. And we're going to do the best we can in the moment, and we're going to hope that thing, pray and ask for things and petition the heavens for things that we want. But at the end of the day, it's not up to us, and we're out of control. And here's Abraham telling us that he's getting up from this place of comfort, and he's going, and he doesn't know where he's going, and a lot of stuff happens to him along the way. So what's the next thing that happens after he gets up and he moves? Is he comes to Canaan, and there's a famine in the land. The famine forces him to move to the land of Egypt. Again, we see this pattern of coming from one place and going to Egypt because of a famine. We're going to have that later when the Jews end up in Egypt, and there's a whole Pharaoh and the Exodus and God bringing us out from Egypt and the Passover story. But it happens here in Abraham's story. Abraham also goes down to Egypt because of a famine in the land of Canaan. And he goes down to Egypt to find food. And I want to talk about this idea of famine, right? So obviously the superficial level is that there was no food, and he was hungry, and he needed to go find food. So he goes down to Egypt to find food. Let's take it to a different level. A different level of understanding is that the famine represents a hunger. It represents a lacking. There's something that I'm lacking. What am I lacking? Am I complacent? Am I sort of good with where I'm at? Or am I able to say, oh no, you know what? I have more to do. I don't know if anybody listened to the story I told Erev before Yom Kippur about this little boy who's from the land of the sticks of mud, and he finds these jewels, and he's trying to find where the jewels come from, and he travels to one city to another city, trying to find out where these jewels live and belong, and he wants to know where the jewels belong, and he gets very comfortable in the cities until he realizes no, he's on a mission. It's to find out where these jewels come from. And that is an analogy for our lives. We can get very complacent being in our places, and everything's good, and we've got our homes, and we've got our food, and whatever we have, we can feel very blessed with that. But are we keep moving? Can we keep moving? Can we keep feeling just a little bit unsettled, just a little bit not quite sure what I need, but I need something else? The hunger, the void, the lacking, the something that I need to fill, right? So how am I going to fill that void? Am I going to recognize there's a void, and what am I going to fill it with? And what Abraham is doing is he's saying, I'm recognizing there's a void, right? The void of famine or something, and I'm going to fill it. What am I going to fill it with? And he goes down to Egypt, and obviously Egypt is a place of constraint. It's a place that wasn't good for him, and he had to leave that place. But there's searching to fill the void. What are we going to fill the void with? How do we fill that void? And Abraham is the one that's trying to fill that void with a connection to God, with a connection to... So God says to him, I'm going to make you a great nation. I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to give you a land. The land. Now we're beginning to have a relationship, not just with Abraham and his descendants, who's going to be a great nation, but we're taught about the concept of the land. The land of Israel is the Jewish homeland. It's integrated into who we are as a people, that the people and the land go together. It's like a shidduch. It's like a partnership, and we need both. We need the land, and we need the people, and we need the Torah. Later on, we get the Torah. And those are the three aspects of our existence in this world that bring us and connect us to God. So what we're looking for is how to fill the void of our lives, the void of land, right? Let's go to Israel. And we see a lot of people now going to Israel. By the way, it's really amazing. I just read this morning that the Israeli woman astronaut who is now on some, I don't know if she's on a space station, or on, I don't know where she is, but she's up in space, that's for sure. And she took with her a picture of the land of Israel from above. From above, she took a picture of the land of Israel. She has that with her in space because, we all who live outside of Israel, when we pray, when we go to our synagogues and we pray facing the Holy Torah, that ark is facing Jerusalem. It's facing Israel, like our direction, our focus, our desire, our yearning is to connect to the land of Israel. That is where the heavens and the earth kiss. That's where spirituality comes down to the world. That's where we, ascend our prayers, go up from there. And that's a very powerful kind of yearning that we have for the land, and to keep that going. So here's Abraham, who begins with that. God says, I'm going to give you the land. I'm going to give you the land. You don't know where it is yet, but I'm going to give it to you. And he promises Abraham he's going to give him, and that his seed will be a great nation. That not the people that he has brought close, the people that he takes with him when he travels, that are not his biological descendants, but his biological descendants will be a great nation. That's what he's promised. God promises Abraham. In this week's Torah portion, he tells Abraham to go outside. He says, go outside and look up at the stars and look at your muzzle. So we believe in the astrology, that in the stars we see the future. We can understand a lot by looking at the astrological configurations of the stars. That's called mazel. When we say to people mazel tov, we're not saying good luck. We're really, really not saying good luck, when people might think that. But the derivative of that term mazel tov is that the astrological signs through which divine blessing comes into the world should be good for you. It is a blessing. I'm blessing. When I say mazel tov to someone, which we're getting a lot of mazel tovs, thank God, because of our new baby, mazel tov on the baby, that the astrological signs that surround this baby should be good, such that divine blessing flows down, that the mazel is good, that it brings us good blessing. Abraham was able to look at the mazel. He could look at the stars, and in the stars it said that he wasn't going to have children, that he and Sarai, his wife, were not going to have children. And he doesn't understand. God says, I'm going to make you a great nation, and from your seed will be a great nation. But he's looking at the stars. So God says, no, you, the Jewish people, exist outside of mazel. You're beyond mazel. You're above mazel. You, the Jewish people, and we can see that through our history, that we are still here, that we continue to exist against all odds, against all persecutions, against everything that's happened to the Jewish people. We are still here, and that is a divine promise, that we will endure, that we will be everlasting, that we will be a light unto the nations, and that we will exist beyond all mazel, that on some level the Jewish people as a mass, as a whole, exist beyond and above the mazel. So God says to Abraham, look up, look at the stars, and I'm going to make you as numerous as the as numerous as the stars. I haven't got the correct language, but we can look it up. You're going to be and as the sand on the seashore, sand and stars. That God promises Abraham that his descendants will be like numerous as the stars and as the sand. And so just to I heard a little class by my friend Rachel Goldbaum, who emphasized the difference between stars and sand, and stars being individual, bright. They're named. Most of the stars can be named. You can actually name yourself after a star, or somewhere there's a organization where you can be named after a star. I think my mother-in-law actually named one of my children after a star. But the idea is that the stars have an individuality to them, and that there's a brightness that shines from those stars, and that each one of us has a brightness that exists within ourselves that is potential to be shone out into the world, right? And at the same time that we're also like part of the sand of the seashore, that we're part of a bigger picture that's bigger than each one of us, that we get subsumed into the mass of the oneness of the sand dune or the sand on the beach. But there's something about that balance, that paradox of being, again, like the whole world was created for you, and yet you're also dust and ashes, that you have both of those sides, that we have both of those sides as descendants of Abraham. God promises him, you will be your descendants will be like the stars and like the sand. So we have this individuality, each one has a name, each one has the potential to shine brightly and to be a force in the world, and yet we're also part of a greater mass of being where we get subsumed into something's greater than us. So don't get too haughty, don't get too arrogant, don't get too full of yourself. Hold those two truths together, sand and stars, same as the whole world was created for you, and at the same time you are but dust and ashes. Hold those two things together. That's who we are. And go back to the the saying that I said at the beginning, where God set man apart from all creatures from the beginning, from the very beginning. We're different. We're a different entity. We're a different creation, and that we are worthy to stand before God. We have that ability to interact and have a relationship with God. Abraham recognized the void, recognized the godliness in the world, recognized by looking at nature that there was God, and this is how, and he compelled to do what God tells him to do. He's compelled with dibor. We have that language of dibor now, being compelled, being commanded to do something, and to try to fill the gap, try to mind the gap. In England, when you get on the metro, it's mind the gap. There's a gap. We need a gap. But this gap, what's this void that we feel, and what do we fill it with, right? Are we filling it with godliness, with spirituality, with surrounding ourselves with good people, with learning the truths of the world, what God wants from us? Those are the things that we should be filling our void with. But we all have a void because we all feel separate. We all feel a little bit lonely. We all feel a little bit like isolated, and that's in that space of feeling lonely, isolated, separate. In that reality comes a desire and a yearning to come close, to learn who we are and what we can do and what we can be. And we can learn that by looking into the Torah and looking at what did Abraham do. So Abraham got up. His first test, his first action that God asked him to do in order to actualize his potential is to get up and leave, to move your place, move your location. And later, when God promises him that he will have children, and as I said, he looked up into the stars and said, doesn't look like I'm going to have children. God says, don't worry, I'm going to change your name and I'm going to change your location. I'm going to make your name no longer, you're going to be Avram, you're going to be Avraham, and Sarai is going to be Sarah. So God adds a letter Hey to Avraham's name, Sarah's name, and they get new names and they get a new location. So again, put that into our world. When we change people's names. If somebody's really sick, we add a name, or we change their names, or the name represents your mazel, represents who you are, how you exist in the world, what your potential is. Your name is a really crucial piece of who you are. And so, when God says you're going to have children, you, Avram, are not going to have children, but you, Abraham, will have children. You, Abraham, and Sarah will have children. You'll have children. Don't worry. I'm changing your name, I'm changing your place, and I'm changing your muzzle. And we think that today. To this very day, we still, sometimes people move in order to change their muzzle, to change their blessings, that what's going to happen to them, how things are going to play out. We change our names in order to do that. And it's not tricking God. It's just saying like there are forces in existence. There are forces happening in the universe that we can tap into by doing these things. And we learn that from the Torah. So we learn when Abraham as Abraham is going to have children, but Abraham as Avram is not going to have children. There we see right there is that change of name. God says, you merit to have children, so I have to change your name so that you will have children. Okay, so God created man, B'Tselem Elokim. That's a key phrase, which means that God created mankind, again, separate from all other creatures. He is created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. And one of the ways in which that is described is that God is the ultimate creator. God created the world. Why? In order to give. God gave. He has no needs. God is not needing of anything. God created the world in order to give to the world, to his creation, to the people he created. It was all a desire on God's part to give. So if we're created B'Tselem Elokim, in the image of God, then we have also in us a desire, a need, a potential to give selflessly, to give without any ulterior motive. It's not because I need whatever I need. Kavod, I need honor, I need praise, I need appreciation. I'm giving because I'm B'Tselem Elokim. I'm created in the image of God. God created selflessly with no needs for himself. Can I do that? Can I be that kind of giver that God is in the world? God is the giver with no reward, with nothing to get back, without receiving anything. and mankind is on a challenge, so to speak, to be that level of giver, to be a giver with nothing, receiving nothing in return. If anybody wants to listen to an amazing, I don't know if it's a Shia class or whatever it is, but I can, let me know and I'll send it to you. Esty Hamilton is a woman who lives in London, and she had a very severely disabled, what do you call him, his health is very, very fragile health. He has, I don't, he doesn't really respond to them. I think he's 16 now. And she describes what it was like when he was a baby and understanding what condition he had. He had some very rare genetic disease. And what it was like to take care of a baby like this. And then as he grows, and now he's 16, what it's like to be a mother of a child like that. And at one point in the class, she says that somebody told her, one of her rabbis told her, that what was coming out from her was a giving that had no reward. You know, those of us who are blessed to be parents, or those of us who give to people, on some level we enjoy having reciprocal, we enjoy having appreciation. We enjoy when somebody says thank you. It kind of equalizes the relationship. When someone says, oh, you know, it was so nice what you did, and they write you a note, or they call you up and say thank you for what you did, or whatever. You're not doing it in order to get the thank you, but the thank you is nice. It reinforces that you did something good. That maybe part of our makeup is that we get pleasure from people saying thank you to us, because we feel like we've done something good. We have done something good. We've given, and the person to whom we've given has received it and enjoyed it and thanked us. That seems like a very nice kind of package, right? You know, I give you something, you say thank you, I feel good about giving to you, I want to give you some more. And what Esty Hamilton is saying, that when she had this child who couldn't smile back, couldn't smile at her, couldn't say thank you to her, is incapable of doing that, that the kindness that she's giving to her child is completely altruistic. There is nothing she's getting back. She's not receiving anything in return. And again, we can sort of argue that. And they say that about people who are on the Chevra Kadisha, who wash people for burial, that the person that they are washing cannot thank them. So it's a kindness that's done, a true kindness, a perfect kindness. I would argue that we do get a lot from doing it, that we feel good about doing what we're doing as a member of the Chevra Kadisha. But the point is that God as a giver without needing to receive, and that's a kind of a level, a level to maybe aspire to be able to give without wanting the appreciation, but just give. You know, I know there are people who give money to people who need it, but they don't want the person to know that it came from them. So they find ways to get the money to that person, and it's done without a desire for appreciation, for thanks. And what a great level that is. And that's Abraham. Abraham was a person who was giving and doing and doing. So one of the people he gives to is his nephew Lot. So Lot comes with him when they leave. They go down to Egypt. They bring Lot with him. And in this week Torah portion, there's a conversation between Lot and Abraham, the shepherds of Lot and the shepherds of Abraham. And they argue about where they're going to settle. And Lot wants to settle in this very lush environment, beautiful pastures for his sheep, etc. And he wants to pasture over here, and it's in the place called Sodom. Maybe you've heard of Sodom. And Lot's wife, in the end, when the whole city gets destroyed and she gets turned into a pillar of salt. We're going to read about that later. But the point is that that Lot wants to settle over there, and it's the best physical environment for his sheep, and he's sort of a little bit like, okay, I want to be there because that's the best place to be. And Abraham's like, I don't want machlochet, I don't want argument with you, I don't want to argue with you, and so take it. But on the other hand, Sodom was a place where people were immoral. There was an immorality amongst the people there that Abraham wanted to guard himself against. I don't want to be in a place where I have to fight against the immorality of the people that I'm living amongst. Lot was not so attuned to that, and he was like, it's fine, I can figure it out, I'll go live there, and I'll have this amazing pastures and everything's going to be good. And in the end, it wasn't all good, but he chose that. What the lesson that Abraham is teaching us here is two things. One is to not enter into argument. if you can, choose the path of peace. If you have to give in, if you have to let go of being right, right? Being right isn't always necessarily as important as peace. Kind of reiterate that in our relationships, being at peace, saying sorry to people. I'm working very hard on saying sorry to people. That the desire to have peace is more important than being right. So in the argument between Lot and Abraham saying, fine, I don't want to be right. If you want to be over there, go be over there. I don't want to be over there. I don't want argument, and I don't want to surround myself with the immorality that exists within the city of Sodom. So again, he's choosing to separate himself from influences that could influence him negatively. And again, we can think about that in our own lives. Are there people, are there circumstances, are there places that we want to avoid because they influence us negatively? Can we learn from Abraham? Don't expose yourself to the things that you need to fight against. Don't expose your eyes, your ears, your mouth, to hearing things, to seeing things, to being in an environment that's going to pull you away. Let's choose to be in an environment that's good, that's going to affirm us, that's going to make us feel good about ourselves, that's going to affirm us, that's going to help us actualize ourselves. Let's go there. Let's not argue. Abraham chose not to argue with Lot. He doesn't want to argue with you. I don't want to argue with you. I want a relationship with you, but I don't want to argue with you. Fine. Let's lose that somehow in our lives. So Abraham doesn't he lets go, and and Lot goes off in his direction. And the point is that this desire to again separate yourself from negative influences. Abraham is known as being on the other side. He's like opposite the ways of the world. He was what's the word I'm looking for? A trailblazer, right? So he had what he understood the world to be. Through looking at nature, he understood God in the world. He understood that there had to be one God. He understood that there had to be things that we're compelled to do. He looked into nature and he could understand what to do and where to go. God told him to leave. He left. He did all these things, and he's trying to now influence the people around him, but also not be influenced by them, right? To stand apart, to be counterculture. And I think even today, the Jews are also counterculture. There are things that we hold as our values, as our core values, that maybe run counterculture to the world around us. And holding steady, hold on, hold true. How do you hold true when perhaps the world or people around us are going in a different direction? And that's a mandate. That's a compulsion. How do I hold on, right? And the more I let the outside world in, the negative influences. There's a lot of positive in the world. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, like if there's people around you who are gossiping or speaking ill of other people, if you're reading magazines that speak ill of other people, and maybe there's a reason, maybe there isn't a reason, but think about how that influences you. If you surround yourself with negativity, if you surround yourself with people who pull you down, again, it's the same message, but it's how we fill the void. Are we filling the void in good ways? Are we filling the void with more anxiety and more negativity? Let's not do that. One of the things to choose to do is to separate yourself from those negative influences, whether it's a place, whether it's people, whether it's things you watch on the television, things you read, etc., like focus what you want, like be mindful, be in the moment, like understand that we, the Jewish people, or we who want to grow in a certain direction with certain moral values, have to hold steady. We have to hold true and not to give in, to hold on. Okay, so Abraham was separate. He was apart from the people around him, and he didn't really know where he was going. Right? God says, just go, just move away. So maybe sometimes we don't know where we're going, but we have to move away. This baby being born, it was against his will he was born, right? He was pushed into this world, pulled into this world, both. Pull the baby out, push the baby out. The baby came out against his will. He came out, doesn't know where he's going, has no idea where he's going, but he's, on some level, as a baby level. But there's a complete letting go. Like, I'm not able to be in control of my destiny. It's all not up to me. It's not up to me. Nothing right now is up to me, baby. This baby, nothing's up to him, right? We choose where to put him down. We choose what clothes to put him in. We choose what to feed him. The family he's born into is not his choice. Living in Atlanta is not his choice. Maybe his grandmother is not his choice. We have a lot of things outside of our our realm, that we don't have a choice. But what we do have a choice as we get older, as we get more mature, as we grow, right? So we don't want to stay as a little child in our spiritual lives. We want to grow and mature and just try to understand, what am I doing? And understand that we have this great potential, and that we can keep growing through our lives, and we can try to search out for spirituality, search out for God, yearn to close the gap that this separateness, that being created separate, creates. So this gap between me and the land, this gap between me and God, this gap between me and Torah wisdom, the wisdom of the world, I want to fill it. How am I going to go about filling it? So I'll leave that as an open question. And what Abraham is doing in the beginning is he's changing. He's changing his location. He's changing. He's learning to not enter into an argument with his nephew Lot. He's arguing to move into a different place, and he feels compelled to do that. And what Lot does is, when Lot decides that he wants to live over there in the city of Sodom, is he rationalizes it. He takes, okay, well, it looks good over there. I want that. But, it's really going to be good. And he uses his mind to rationalize something that he wants in his heart, right? So we all do that. We all do that on some level, right? I know that I want this. And so I kind of rationalize it. I say, well, it's all for the best, and it's really what I'm supposed to do, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So we're able to do that. And Lot sort of twists things, because he ends up in the city of Sodom, which is very immoral, and he gets brought down by it. So just to be mindful of that ability that we have to rationalize things, so that we do what we want to do. And so maybe, again, that's why we need something outside of ourselves to tell us what to do, or to hold as a connector, as an opposite us, so that it's not just our own system deciding what we want, that we need something outside of ourselves to help us journey through life, right? So Abraham is journeying through life, and we are also journeying through life. And Abraham, through the 10 tests that God gives him, actualizes his potential. He's able to access all that he is, the chesed, the kindness that Abraham is known for. He is the epitome of kindness, is Abraham. Abraham is all kindness. He wants to give to all the people around him. His tent, as we know, is open at four sides. By the way, I'm going to keep talking and talking, but in this week's Torah portion, we read about the Brit Milah. God tells him that in order to enter into the covenant with me, you need to have a bris, you need to have a circumcision. It's going to be done on the 8th day, and you have to have that, and that's going to connect you to the land of Israel. There's a covenantal connection between the Jewish people engaging in the act of circumcision, Brit Milah, on the 8th day, and the land of Israel. They're connected. So Abraham circumcises himself, and he's sore, and he's sitting in his tent, but he continues to want to exude the kindness, the giving nature that he has, the selfless nature that he has. He's in pain, and he still wants to give. He's looking for passers-by. He's looking for people to give, welcome into his tent, to feed, to take care of. He's continuing to focus on that character trait of kindness and giving that he wants to give. And I have to just give a shout out to my daughter, who was in the middle of this incredibly difficult, painful delivery, and she's in pain, like more pain than she ever had. Fine. And push that baby out. And what's the first thing you care about? You don't care about you. You care about that baby. Is that baby okay? Is he okay? Like I don't see him. I don't hear him. Is he okay? And that moment, it's very emotional. I feel very emotional about this. And I think, just to feed in here, because I think it's very apropos, that one of the prophecies that we learn in our tradition is that before the end of days, before Messiah comes, before everything gets resolved, we're going to feel like that mother in pain. We're going to feel like that birthing mother before the redemption, before the Messiah comes, before we get everything, we see clarity what's going to be. There's going to be this really dark time where it's painful, and we don't know how it's going to end, and we don't know what's going to be. And then in a blink of an eye, it's going to be good. And that's the promise. And I really witnessed that the other day in that delivery room when Sonia delivered that baby. It was bleak. It didn't look like, we didn't know where we were going, and we were praying and we were hoping, then thank God, blink of an eye, the baby starts crying, and okay, it wasn't a blink of an eye to stop the bleeding, but it was dark and it was deep, and it was, don't know where we're going, and we don't know how this is going to end, and I'm holding in there, and I'm praying to God, please, can this end well? And thank God it did. But just the idea that it goes from a dark to a light, that goes from dark to light. And Jewish people go from Erev to Boker. We go from night, like our days begin at night. Like Shabbat begins on a Friday night. We begin with darkness and we end with light. And that's what we're doing. We're in a world where we're going to end with the light. God promises us we're going to end with the light. So don't worry, hang in there. It's going to be good in the end. That's the message. So Abraham trusts in God. He leaves his birthplace. He goes where he tells him. He has this whole argument with Lot. He doesn't have the argument with Lot. He gives in. We have a lot of things going on in this Torah portion. The underlying thing is Abraham and his kindness. Abraham, before this covenant that God promises him, you're going to have the land. You're going to have a nation. You're going to be the source of blessing in the world. Abraham goes into this deep sleep. He has this deep sleep. And the word used for this particular kind of deep sleep is only used in 2 other places in the Torah. It's used when God puts Adam to sleep to create Eve from his side. He puts him into this really, really deep sleep. And he also puts Jonah. We just read the story of Jonah on Yom Kippur. But most people probably weren't awake because it was in the afternoon service on Yom Kippur. But anyway, in the story of Jonah, Jonah goes into this very deep sleep in the boat, and Abraham gets put into this very, very deep sleep. And I think that it's very interesting to think about the deepness of a sleep and how that becomes almost like a place of confusion, a place of darkness. It's so deep, it's so dark, it's so confusing. It's almost, it is, compared to our exiles, that we are far away from the light of where we're going to end up, that us being separated from God, the way we are, separated from the land, the way we are, it's not all the way it's supposed to be or could be or is going to be, that we're in a place of darkness. And in our prayers every day we say, God, wake me up from my slumber, let me see with clarity, help me see through all of this darkness. And when Abraham's in this deep sleep, then God wakes him up, and then this is the covenant that he has. So on some level, Abraham is waking up, Adam is waking up, Jonah is waking up, and we are also compelled to, given the charge, to also wake up. Can we wake up? Wake up from our slumber, see with clarity, and then make the changes necessary to actualize ourselves, to shine, to receive all the blessing that God wants to give us. Anyway, so I'm sure I've been speaking way too long, but I just want to recap a couple of things. I want to maybe think about the few things that Abraham in this week's Torah portion teaches us. He's teaching us that as much as we're a minority in the land around us, we have to hold on to who we are, hold on to our connection to each other and to God, and to this land that we have. We know where the land is now. We know where the land is, and we're focused on that land, and we're praying for that land, and we want reunification with that land. We want the land to be the kind of land that it's going to be, and that it is the potential to be, and that we can reconnect to it. So this minority status that we, the Jewish people, live in is the same minority statement, that is situation that Abraham existed. Abraham was separate from the people. He held high a way of living and value system that was counterculture, and he held onto it because that he understood was the truth. That was his wisdom, his chachma said, this is what I have to hold on to because this is truth. This is going to fill the void. I'm not going to fill it with falsehoods. I'm not going to fill it with things that don't last. I'm going to fill it with things that last. I'm going to fill it with connection to God. That's what I'm going to fill it with. So can we do that? Like we have to, when we're separate and when we're feeling like the pulls of society taking us away, like hold on, like no, what am I supposed to do? What am I focused on? Where's my path what's my Lech Lecha? Where's God leading me? What's my journey? Each one of us, like just to say that at the beginning, I said how we were created separate and worthy. Each one of us is worthy to have that kind of relationship with God. So feel good about ourselves and work on ourselves and actualize ourselves. That's the job each one of us has. And we're looking at Abraham, who was the beginning person. Like everything goes after the beginning. So Abraham's teaching us this is what you have to do. Sometimes you have to leave your place. Sometimes you have to not be right and give in and do what brings peace into the world. And sometimes you might need to change your name. Your name might need to be changed. And God will protect us. God is our shield. So at the end of one of the major blessings that we say, God is the shield of Abraham. He is the Magain of Abraham. He's the shield. It protects him, looks after him. We as a Jewish people who exist, as I said, above the stars. We're above the muzzle. We are like a people apart that God promises, I'm going to bring you into the land. I promise you that you will always exist, that you are an eternal nation, and that you are the firstborn, you are the chosen people. We could talk about that another time. But that the physical laws don't apply to you. You are a people apart. And just even to think about that, that's a huge concept. So Abraham starts off as a minority. He's promised the land, and he focuses on kindness. He's a role model for kindness and for education, for teaching people, for bringing people along, for sharing his knowledge, right? And one of the things that I heard from Rabbi Foreman is that this connection between his family, his unparalleled devotion to his family. So he's very connected to his family. He's also very connected to God, and so what happens is that Abraham has two siblings, and one of his siblings dies. Haran is one of his siblings. His sibling dies, and Abraham marries Haran's daughter, Sarah. And that is sort of like there's later on in the Torah we learn of a law called Yibum, where a brother would be mandated to marry the widow of his brother. If his brother were to die and not have children, then he would be commanded to marry the widow. And this is sort of like a little bit like a Yibum, where Abraham marries Sarah. And again, it's about legacy. It's about, I care enough about Haran, my brother, that it couldn't be. It must. Anyway, it wasn't his daughter. I know. Anyway, but there should be a legacy. Yeah, it was. There should be a legacy that my brother Haran, he died, and there's not going to be children coming from him. So I'm going to continue the legacy of my dead brother Haran. The kindness that Abraham shows by doing that, by marrying into Haran's family, in order for there to be a legacy that comes from Haran, is again showing us how kind and how selfless Abraham is. And let's even just end on that note, to end on the note of saying that in the same way that God selflessly and with great giving nature created the world, Abraham is teaching us through his journey through life, through all the tests that he goes through. He's showing us that it is possible for us as people today, back then, to act selflessly without needing to receive anything in return. And I'd like to end on that point, because I think that is a huge thing to think about, because we are very much dependent on, or I'll speak for myself, that I enjoy having people appreciate what I do, right? It's nice to have somebody say thank you. But the ultimate, maybe the bar that we're heading to is the bar that Abraham showed us, that God is, which is give without needing to receive back. So that's one thing. And then the flip side is that as God is this giver who is continually giving, that there have to be in the world the ability for those people to receive what God is giving. And Abraham wanted to be that vessel, in the beginning, we're back to the beginning, the vessel that receives the kindness that God wants to give. He's open. I want to do what you want to do. Tell me what to do. Show me what to do. I'm going to do it. I'm going to run ahead of you. I'm going to represent you in the world. I want to be in relationship to you, God. And that ability to receive the goodness that God wants to give. That's Abraham. He gets the covenant, he gets the promises, he gets the from you will come this great nation, you'll be like the stars, you'll be like the sand. Like Abraham is receiving the blessings that God wants to bring into the world. So again, how do we do that? How do we mold ourselves into becoming vessels that God wants to shower us with blessings? And I think the quintessential point of it is to be a giver. That when we're givers and when we seek peace between people in our families, that we become vessels that will receive blessing. Okay, so that's what I want to end on. I want to end on trying to be givers without receiving, and trying to be receivers by being givers and by pursuing peace, because that creates the vessels for blessing. Okay, so I bless us all that we should journey through life not knowing where we're going, not knowing what will come our way, what obstacles we have to go over, not knowing quite what will be the end, what we'll encounter, and yet knowing that through all these struggles, through all these encounters, we're going to grow, we're going to actualize our potential, and that they're all tools for teaching us who we are. We have so much. Lech, Lecha, God is saying to Abraham, Lech, Lecha, get up and go, but also go inside. Go inside and know who you are. So when you know who you are, then you can work on bringing that out and pushing that out into the world, because there's only one you, and you have that unique ability and unique talents and a unique toolbox that this world needs. And I bless us all that we're able to push as much of that into the world and create more and more vessels for blessing in the world.